Well, we will talk all about that publisher, which I think we know the name of it. I'll just say it. It was Zero Books that you were going to submit
That's
to.
right, with Zero Books. That's right.
We'll talk about what happened there in the Parrot Room. So people who want
Okay.
the inside scoop on what's been going on, but not all the details, nothing that I shouldn't say, but just sort of like in a general way, they can tune into the Parrot Room.
The most orthodox of all Marxist economists I have ever met.
The reason why I'm still a Marxist is that I claim that this structure of belief, of displaced belief, you find it in what Marx described as commodity fetishism.
That all really dialectical and intelligent human beings will have a sense for evil and some sympathy for the devil, or they will be just a little stifled and bored. I think that's not wrong. Just a little sympathy for the devil won't hurt.
Inside Critical Theory brings you this Diet Soap interview.
You can shine your shoes and wear a suit. You can comb your hair and look quite cute. You can hide your face behind a smile. One thing you can't hide is when you cripple inside. You can wear a mask and paint your face. You can call yourself the human race. You can wear a collar and a tie. One thing you can't hide is when you cripple inside.
So Susanna Kleeman is a novelist and an author and an artist and a filmmaker now, right? Or a video maker
Well,
anyway.
thanks to you. Thanks to you,
Yeah.
Doug. You're Margaret Svengali, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. And you are the author behind the novel Twice, and you're working
am.
now on a new book that's going to be nonfiction.
That's right. But that's a bit up in the air, isn't it? I mean, I was working for a certain publisher, hoping in talks with the publisher. Things have changed now, but we'll have to see.
Well, we will talk all about that publisher, which I think we know the name of it. I'll just say it. It was Zero Books that you were going to submit
That's
to.
right, with Zero Books. That's right.
We'll talk about what happened there in the Parrot Room. So people who want the inside scoop on what's been going on, but not all the details, nothing that I shouldn't say, but just sort of like in a general way, they can tune into the Parrot Room, and I'll tell you, and you can tell me what you think about it. But yeah, you should write this book of nonfiction, because I'll make an announcement now that I am going to be starting a publishing house, a media company. Yeah, I'm going to send out. Going to send out a press release today after our conversation. So.
Well,
right now, before I press send, I have to decide, is it going to be called Sublation Media or Diet Soap Media? Onto the dating topic. Yeah, I would say it's been going pretty well. I've met a variety of different women. It's nice to know that somebody will swipe right on an old man like me. That's nice.
Definitely. It's nice to get a like on the tweets, isn't it? It's all those things, all those micro things that don't necessarily mean anything. They seem to mean a lot and keep us tiding over. Definitely.
I would say that my biggest trouble is figuring out how to be in a beginning of a relationship. Like I was married for a long time. And I'm just not at all used to this idea of like, I'm starting a relationship. What does that even, I revert back to like high school mentality, I think, a bit.
I'm very curious about what it's like to meet someone online and for it all to be good, because it's quite a comfortable interface, isn't it? It's kind of like a shop. It's an interface we're familiar with. It's a kind of Amazon of people liking, send back if it's not. And then what happens when you've no longer got that interface, when it's actually about meeting in real life, perhaps even bringing someone into your home? How does that work out?
I've done that I brought someone into my home once, and I wouldn't say it was a gigantic success. But I would say that the app doesn't stop when you meet in person.
Okay.
There's a mentality that develops through the use of the app, where everyone at first you assume everyone is stupid. Everyone is.
When you say do you mean the world in general does, or do
okay, I guess I should just say I assume that everybody is relatively dumb, and that no one's going to get me. So the first round is just testing out. Okay, I'm not gonna put on a facade. I'm gonna be how I am, and the women who will respond to that, they'll go to the next step. So like, one of the things on my app is like, don't get me, started about blank or I'll never shut up. It's one app that's, you can fill in the blank, and I put in the labor theory of value. So, if a woman like actually responds to that and says, what is that about? It seemed to be like a good indicator. But yeah, there's this. So then you show up on the date, and like the first few minutes are really important. Like they're judging you and you're judging them. And little things matter.
And you have formed an impression of someone through interfaces, through digital technology. You meet them in the flesh. It's got nothing to do with it. It's got nothing to do with the impression in the flesh can be completely different, even if you've spoken to someone. Is that true?
Yeah, although it's nice when they show up and they look like their picture.
Okay.
That's a benefit. I mean, first of all, you can recognize them, so you don't have to, ask. Are you? So that's a plus when they look like their picture. And then the next thing for me is usually it's like I'm at a bar or a coffee shop, but if it's at a bar, the last date I can remember, met at a bar. I got there first. I already had a beer. I said, "Oh, I've got a beer. I got this IPA. Do you want a beer?" And she said, "Sure." And I said, "What do you want?" And she said, "I'll have an IPA." I'll say, "Oh, great. I'll grab you one." She said, "Well, what kinds do they have?" And I said, I just asked them to give me their best one, and I'll do the same for you. And she's like, "Oh, no. No. I have to go look." And so then I'm like, well, okay, high maintenance. You're already on my shit list here. And see, I know that's bad.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I know, but I understand it also. I also understand, it's so strange. It's such a strange interaction because you don't really, if they're not going to, you don't know what they're like. You don't want to invest all that time. It's not like they're a friend or someone that you've met in a way that, you even have to be polite to a certain extent. And it's better for all concerned to have minimum interaction. And therefore, is that fair to say?
Yeah, but I don't end a date at that point, but I just, it's a check mark.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no. But by the way, like I understand in normal circumstances with a friend, if I said, I'll go get you a beer, I have this IPA, and they say, no, let me go check. I'm not going to that's not a check mark against someone I actually know. Right.
Yes, but then you've got a wider context for them. You've got a context for them where they're a friend of a friend. You can have a sense of them. You can have a sense of their milieu. But when you've just, as it were, bought somebody through a shop-like interface, then you don't know anything about them, and they can be discarded like a faulty product sent back. You can have the checklist of, well, wanted a fancy IPA. That's why I'm returning the product. Right. So
it wasn't like they all cost the same amount. I mean, it's not like it was just like,
I understand.
It's just a complication of the moment. Like, I'm buying you a beer. I'm going to go up and get one for you. Oh no, you're going to come up too. Now we have to put our masks back on. Both of us. And leave the booth. Okay. It's just like, so that's an example of the kind of interaction. I'm sure that when they meet me, there are all sorts of little tells, and like when I start weeping about my divorce, that's probably not a great look for me. That hasn't happened in a while. I've gotten better at not appearing to be completely closed off to the encounter. So
personally, and obviously we can't speak for every man and every woman here, but I think caring about your divorce is a nice thing. I wouldn't want too much blubbing personally, but having, not just being, oh, she's such a bitch, blah, blah, you know, that would be a different route of going down. And that would be definitely on my checklist. That would definitely.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel that way at all. So, yeah, that is not a problem. But the main thing to go back to the kind of digital app side of it is that you are in this strange position. It's different. In some ways, it's a lot easier, like you've been saying, than actually like dating as I remember it. Because the way I remember dating is, you know, you're in high school or college and you see someone, you talk to them a few times, you decide you like them. Mm-hmm. And now you have to, if you're the man, or maybe if you're the woman too, things are changed. It's modern times, Susanna. But you have to decide, okay, am I going to make my feelings known and ask this person out? Am I going to swipe right and give them the opportunity to my face for them to swipe left, you know, say no. And even if you do ask someone out and you're kind of friendly with them, there's still this sort of ambiguity. Are you going out as friends? Are you going out on a date? I've had many
mess. Yeah. Basically, all this, and in fact, largely, you know, it's a wider point about digital stuff in general. It seems to avoid mess. It seems to promise that we're not going to have the mess, the humiliation, the pain. It seems controllable. And of course, there are limitations to that. And if you don't have mess, maybe you miss out on other stuff also. But it means also you have the feeling of power, right? If you're if you like someone in real life and you're trying to, you don't even know if they like you. You don't know if they are even open to wanting to date anybody. There's a lot more mystery about them, right? Whereas when someone is presented to you in an interface, you know, in my, you know, I don't have that much experience. I have much less experience than you currently in this world. And the sense I have about it, my knee-jerk, you know, elderly Luddite aspect, which I would say is not Luddite, and I would give you a long, complicated argument about why it isn't, but I won't do that right now. Mm-hmm. Basically, you almost have thrown away all the value of it by entering the sphere of going on a dating site, because you have given up the mess, and therefore you've given up the thrill also. You are meeting people almost like presented slabs of meat in some online butchers. That's a really horrible way of putting it. Mm-hmm. You know, the meat is already presented. The meat is already dead, cut out, put there. Okay, this is a really horrible way of presenting it, but it's already there. And so all the risk, the mess, the drama isn't there. These people are already saying, look at me, I need a boyfriend or girlfriend. And you don't have to go through the first layer of it. And then also there are rules about this place. You have a feeling of power. You're in front of the screen. You can see the people. You can say, I like this one. I don't like this one. And there are lots of people also. It's not like how it is in the real world where there's really one person. I think from my dim and distant memories of meeting people in the real world, there's one person and you see them around. You feel something for them. You begin to build your fantasy about them. You think about them. It's them you care about. It's not a whole slew and array of people. But maybe I'm just talking about myself. Maybe I'm just
No. I think you're right. At least that's how I remember it going too. You get a crush on someone. No, you don't get a crush on 4 or 5 people. You get a crush on someone.
You get a crush on someone. And that's not just dangerous in terms of mess. Are they going to like you? This, that, the other. You begin to have a fantasy about that person also. And you think about them in different ways. They become someone that they're not. You have to constantly go back to them. Are they that person? Are they that person? A whole almost fictional realm enters with you, that person. You know, a whole lot of mess happens. And I would say that if you manage to get it together with somebody, given that background of feeling with them, maybe it's more powerful. But what do I know? You're the one doing the online dating.
No. I think you're right. But so what I have experienced so far is that there is a potential through the clean shopping experience of the apps for you to connect with someone who becomes the one you have a crush on for a while. I mean, I had that experience so far. It was, I'll just say people who have been following this will know who she is because she's actually been on one of my videos. She's a woman who was in LA. We connected through Tinder while she was here. But she was just visiting. So she was not going to be I couldn't go on a date with her. Right. So but you see that's interesting.
That's interesting. Therefore, that person was a bit less available to you than somebody who was on Tinder in your hometown area. So in fact, her not being a local was something a bit more about the world that I'm talking about here. Anyway,
right. Yeah. So so we started talking, but it was like, oh, well, we're not going to be, we're not going to date because we don't really live in, that's not possible, but we could talk. And, and she knew a little bit about Zero Books actually. And she was a fan of Michael Brooks. And so I talked to her
So you were able to lord it over as the big publisher. That must have been good also.
Yeah. No, right. I had I was the cool one in the encounter. That's always brand new experience for me. That never happened before. So that kind of developed into like a long distance romance. And then I went to LA and for legitimate business reasons, but it was,
I am really sure that they were legitimate business reasons.
They were. I went, I submitted something to a film festival. It was all, I was invited. It was a coincidence, I swear. But anyway, I got to LA and, so, and then very romantic weekend, and then, but through the course of it, she realized I was still pretty much, emotionally crippled by the divorce, and that the prospect of a real future was dim, that like I wasn't going to be moving on into like, to have a real relationship would have meant one of us had to move eventually.
Yeah.
And we would have had to start down a process of pretty serious commitment.
Yeah.
Sooner than maybe would be normal because of the distance. Right.
Yeah.
So that didn't happen. Yeah, go ahead.
But you obviously had a real connection with this person. I can see from the way you talk. So that's a pity. I'm sorry that it didn't work out, but I think it feeds into my theories, which is you need mess and problems. You need distance separation. You need elusive qualities. You need things that the internet and, the people, availability of the people in the road down from you doesn't necessarily give. And maybe that fed in it. Well, I'm sorry that it didn't work out. Maybe it will.
Who knows what will happen next? But the main thing, I guess, I want to shift away from my personal life. I've been,
this is.
Yeah, but it's my own channel. It's like it's not.
Why not have personal therapy? You can, I started with Slavoj Žižek. We can all just come here and give you a.
So it's very different. It's a little different to be on my own, even though I really am wanting to carry on with critical theory and analysis and Marxism and all of that.
Me too. Is this of any interest to your viewers? I'm wondering. Well, I'm sure.
I don't know. Well, let's talk about what the implications are socially. For not just me, but for everybody, right? I will go back to my own experience, but everybody who I have gone out with I've been going out with in the context of this pandemic, right? And it all started after the vaccine was available. That's when I started meeting women. But they've all been so everyone's been socially isolated during this time. Many people are like me, having gone into the pandemic as a couple and somewhere along the way having lost that relationship. For whatever reasons. The real reasons are always different, but the big social context is the same, right? So like the individual particular reasons are very different from person to couple. So there's that. And there's also a sense that I get from most people that they feel as though their life and their destiny is particular and individual and private. And when they're looking for someone else to share that with, they're not looking, I don't think people are generally looking for a way to get involved in a larger community with someone else, I have a sense of like what a family life is about. And that starts as a couple, but it stretches out into all sorts of relationships. But the women I'm dating are around my age, and for the most part, and they are looking to hole up as they go into being old age, I guess, eventually. I mean, we're middle age now. And it's all very much about a private taste and private desire, and not about trying to make your way. It's a difference between being, a young adult and looking for someone, and looking at the same time to become someone,
Yes.
and being someone and looking for someone to fit into who you already are.
Yes. Yes. But that is the age that we are, perhaps. And I'm actually heartened to hear you say that, because as an outsider to the dating scene currently, I don't know that that's my impression of how things are, for example, with younger people. And in thinking about this and writing about it, what I feel is that people are just, well, and maybe that is slightly what you're saying here, but that it's difficult, that they are more functional things, that they're there as support systems, and ultimately, of course, that's what relationships are. Everything I was saying to you before about attraction, thrill, all that stuff is entirely ephemeral. We know all that stuff's entirely ephemeral. The challenge is to take something from that world and bring it into this world. But the impression I get is actually that people are a little bit more, because of the internet and the massive connections it lets us make with all sorts of people, romantic, not romantic, all sorts of very strange sorts of friendships you can have with people on social media, etc. To a certain extent, some of our social needs are taken care of. In the past, if we can imagine such a thing, no internet. Can you imagine such a thing? You really had to,
I remember.
You really had to be careful with the people who are immediately around you, right? They had to be interesting. They had to give you something. You had to be embedded in a much smaller community. That was it. You weren't going to be having, your likes from people in Australia, your communications with anybody. But to an extent, having that allows us to have lots of different sorts of micro, macro relationships with people whose names we never even know, whose faces we never even see, but who are our buddies. And that puts a bit less pressure on the intimate relationships that we need to have. And I think those things become a bit more functional. And I think that we all are slightly disenchanted from the idea of enchantment, which is what, as teenagers, attracts us to other people. We've become old hands, even teenagers themselves, There's a sort of cynicism that's true, which is that relationships can't last, cause a lot of pain, are nothing. People cannot, in the end, well, they're not nothing, but nobody can give you that, basically. And so therefore, we've all become sort of old before our time in terms of, it seems to me, in terms of being able to therefore say, okay, well, I need someone to have sex with. It's good to share your house with somebody. It's good to have someone with similar interests. We like to go and watch these movies and do this. However, my other needs are catered for in other places. And also, let's be frank, my need, I can watch porn. I can, there's less pressure on the relationship. The relationship can be more something that just is there as a front in society, maybe, as something that just makes you an established person amongst other people, that gives you some comfort, and then that also allows you to post about it on Instagram to show X, Y, and Z. I'm making terrible generalizations here. What I'm saying is what I think is that the actual challenge of taking your relationship from the initial fantasy sexual attraction phase and actually trying to make a world with somebody, it's really hard, and it really is challenging to yourself. And what happens in it, perhaps I'm idealistic, but in theory what happens in it is that you meet one other person, and by your interaction with them, you both change, and you're both forced to go to the roots of what you are, and almost, it's not a therapeutic relationship, but to some extent it is. You're forced to talk about the truth of your life, the truth of who you are inside yourself. Mm-hmm. Your ideas about yourself are challenged. But I think perhaps the world that we drift into now, you don't need to be challenged in the same way. The other person and your relationship to some degree is a prop. And you don't need to be challenged. You can just continue to be your hermetically sealed self, bumbling around with a variety of less intense relationships, some of which are with people that don't exist at all, with bots, for pleasure or not for pleasure. But, there are lots of different interactions that we can have. And therefore, what used to happen, which is a true retreat, I mean, you were saying your experience is people retreating, but a true retreat, not because you're, nearing pension age, no offense to either of us, and you want to settle down and know what the future is going to solidly look like. But the true stepping back to make a world of two people, an imperfect world's never going to work out properly. The work of doing that, perhaps we don't need to bother with that anymore.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because what you're describing, this kind of relationship as a facade, as a prop, as a way to fit in and conform, these are all things that maybe people who are progressive or countercultural or bohemian would have said or may still say about conventional marriages and nuclear families and like living in the suburbs. So you have these pseudo relationships, pseudo marriages that are set up in order to fit into a system of an economic system, a cultural system, a neighborhood, picket fence and a dog and car in the garage, 2.4 kids, whatever. And the idea of, breaking from monogamy and just following your desire and maybe being with many different people. And that would
that's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm not saying not to do that, but that's not exactly what I'm saying.
No, I'm just saying, but that's what the apps are promising, right? The apps are promising on the one level, the apps are promising a way to get to that conventional relationship. But on the other hand, you can use them as a way to just follow your desire.
You can, and we should all be honest. We, all of us in our relationships with everybody, with our kids, with our nearest and dearest, we're also in a relationship with our phone. We definitely are, And
oh my God, my relationship with my phone is the most intense relationship in my life. There's nobody who I love more than my phone.
Look how your face lit up. Have you got your phone there? Show me your phone. I want to see. Look at your beauty. Let me see your lovely phone.
It's broken. I have to get a new one.
Oh, poor phone. Get it a lovely new face. It deserves a lovely new face.
Look, there's my vaccine verification there on my phone.
I love it. So you can show it to all. Okay, yeah. So your face lit up there. It doesn't really matter.
It's not true. I actually do love my kids more than my phone. Like if in a fire, I would rescue my kid before my phone, but I would think of the phone and I would rescue my phone.
Okay, you would think of your phone. And the other part of it is like if the person around you is boring you, or, if your partner is whatever, I just look at my phone. There's going to,
you don't do it on your Tinder dates. That's a bad move. Don't look at your phone on your Tinder dates.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've done it and it doesn't go well. But
really? Well, especially if you're looking at Tinder while on your Tinder.
Well, no, that is
I would say you don't do that.
The absolute no is you do not look at the dating apps while you're on the date from one of the dating apps.
See, there's an impish element to me that just wants to go and do stuff like that. I just to take it to the nth degree. And I always think of Baudrillard, whose advice to us all is give back more than you were given. That's his ringing phrase at the end of The Perfect Crime, I think it is. The absolute law is give back more than you're given. And I really believe that. And I believe it in an impish way. So I would quite like to go on some Tinder dates and then look at Tinder while I'm on the Tinder dates. I want to. Does that make me? I think I've learned a lot, may I say, by watching the Zero Books channel. I came into this as a mere novelist, as you know, and I have received I've received political education, and it's been very interesting too. So I've learned some terms. I've learned the term accelerationist. I never knew any of this stuff. I think someone had written that under a video that I had made with you, and I had to go and look that up. So, but I thought maybe I'm an accelerationist. Maybe that's what Baudrillard is saying. Maybe that's what I believe. You should just, you should just be on the phone the whole time. You should be on the Tinder dates the whole time while you're on Tinder.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Like early days of using these apps to meet women, my attitude was I'm just collecting characters. I was going to write a book. I may still, right? Okay. I'm just collecting characters. So any encounter, if it has something of interest, is a success. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a spark.
That's the great value of being a novelist, right? Isn't it? You can do anything. It's all fantastic research.
So you could kind of troll the people you're dating. So decide which person, okay, on this one I'll look at my Tinder app and see how they respond. And this one, I'll tell them a made up story about my time living in a hippie commune and being brainwashed by the guru. Or on this one I'll just talk about my pet turtle the whole time, and just see how many times I can mention the name of my turtle, which is Josh.
Sorry, I have to find. Is this stuff you've done? You've done?
No, but I could have done these things.
You
right
could
now.
have done it. Okay.
But instead, my favorite early Tinder date was with a 6'1" blonde Russian immigrant. She's going to get her PhD in Philadelphia in critical theory.
Okay, so she knew about value-labor relations, therefore.
That's why she swiped. I think that's why she swiped right on me, is because I mentioned some theory stuff in it, right?
Good.
And she was quite beautiful and very demanding, but also told me right away that we weren't going to have any kind of romantic relationship, but nonetheless was very insistent upon having carving out bits of my time while she was still in Portland. So I met her a few times, like 4 times or 3 or 4 times. And like the first time it was an encounter where she told me about her life and how she left Russia and the man she left behind and the family she left behind. And I just would have none of it. I was like really like very directly skeptical about her motivations and
well, you see, there you go. You're illustrating again what I was saying, which is that the people that you've met from the internet, no offense to the people you've met on the internet, but they're not fully real. You can speak to them in a way that you would never speak to someone who was a friend of a friend, because it would have, there would be social prices for you to pay were they to go back home. That Doug can, you can treat people, and that's why you can ghost people so easily that you meet. One can.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're not real, right? Because they're not fully real. And also because they have, and here I might be completely wrong and also completely sexist, but I especially feel that the dating apps are not good for women because, within the culture, we are all told, although I don't think it's true, but we'll get into that separately. It's a different discussion, that it is men who are so crazy and desperate for women and therefore, men chasing after women. But I think women really lose out in being presenting themselves in the dating app because they're saying, yes, I'm desperate too. That's not what they're saying. They're obviously not what they're saying. But what I'm saying is there's a slight feeling, a sexist feeling against women that even I have at the back of my head. And I've been on dating apps myself, in the deep past before I had my kids. But what it's like, okay, you are therefore, you're there, therefore I can treat you slightly badly. What do you think about that? Very wrong thing.
Yeah, I think let's see if I can put it more concretely. They're a little bit sluttish because they're on the...
Not what I was going to say. Well, but that's so interesting that you said that. I wasn't going to say that. What I was going to... It's not that they're sluttish, but it's that they, by the power of their allure, which is what we sexistly imagine that all women have, haven't been able to attract men within their territory. They haven't been able to bring men to them. There must be something wrong with them. Why are they here? Therefore, I'm glad they're here, but I can play around with them and treat them less respectfully. Right.
Well, okay. So the connotation of the negative connotation for a woman being a slut, okay, is not simple. I don't think the negative connotation when people are insulting women by calling them sluts is that they actually don't have enough sex appeal. That it's not that they have too much and they let it go.
Interesting.
They must go to beyond what decorum would allow for in order to attract a man.
So fascinating and so amazingly interesting. And I think about all this a lot because that's what I'm writing my book about. You see, I could bore on for a long time about all
but do you think that am I right? Am I landing on something there?
I don't. I tell you, I think it's way deeper than that. I think it's way deeper than that. And I tell you, one thing's been fascinating for me receiving a smidgen of political education off the Zero Books channel is to see so much talk, left wing, right wing, communists, all this, where it seems to me much beyond that and much more basic than that is a problem between women and men. That all these things are in response to. And what I think it is, I've said this to you before. I even made video for Zero Books channel about this very theme. What I think is that men need women and are attracted to women in a much more desperate way than women need men and are attracted to men. Here I'm making massive generalizations. And I think
that's true.
I think men are really, really vulnerable to women. I think that men can lose it for women, for women's bodies, for the care and love that they associate with mother sometimes, which can get all messed up in it. Men are incredibly vulnerable to women. And I think men can be very, very hurt by women. And in the whole culture of incel, for example, you can see a lot of men who have been hurt by women, by the disdain that women have, is not the same. So I think that my personal theory of the universe and the world is men have created the world as a defense against women. And part of the defense, so part of it is building cities, building capitalism, building commodities, building other things. It's for themselves. You know, if you think of it like a bee colony, so the queen bee, the women have all the power there. The men are the drones. Men have decided they don't want to be drones. And unlike in a bee colony, men are generally in Western society at any rate bigger than women. And they've been able by their physical dominance to exert their will, basically. And what they've done is they've built a society full of men's clubs, male organizations, capitalism, factories, where they're defended. They've got stuff to do. They can go to their men's clubs, drink beer. They have a defense against the tremendous power that women have over them. But I also think part of the defense that they've had in this tremendous power is to brainwash women. And I think that part of what they've done in the mass historical brainwashing that they've done is to deny women the agency of their sexuality. And I'm saying nothing new here. But I think it's been very, very important for the project of men historically to make sure that women don't think of themselves as interested in sex as men are. And any woman that you encounter who is as interested in sex is historical. Obviously, everything's completely different in our perfect new world now. But any woman that you meet who is interested in sex is either a deprogrammed woman, a very dangerous thing, a woman who hasn't had the project done on them and doesn't know that they're not supposed to be so interested in sex, or they are potentially a woman of low self-esteem. And you were saying not so attractive, but I think that's not exactly true also. I think it's not just about you're not attractive enough to get men. Don't know their own worth because of whatever family history has happened to them, and therefore are trying to exchange self-worth, have confused self-worth with sexual attraction, interest from men, because, you know, you can be in a very low place yourself and think, I'm nothing, who would want to be with me? At least I'm a woman with body parts that these people seem to be interested in. Maybe I'll go for that.
Yeah. Okay. So if you've seen the movie She's Gotta Have It.
Yes.
The Spike Lee film. Okay.
Yes, a long time ago. Yes.
Yeah, it was. Well, I saw it a long time ago too. I saw it in the theater when it came out. I was, you know, an adult already when that came out. I think I was 20.
Poor old you. I'm only 18, Doug. But anyway.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the thing about that movie is that the main character in that movie, I would not characterize her as a slut. Okay, even though she had multiple sex partners and liked sex, right? She was choosy. She just had a lot of options. So the epithet of slut is applied to someone who is indiscriminate, not so much as that they are promiscuous. The promiscuousness is seen as happening because of their indiscriminate, but in She's Gotta Have It, that idea is put to rest. That idea is overturned as you watch the movie. So you see a woman who's aware of her own sexual desire, sexually empowered, clearly more powerful than the men that she's with, right? And yet is not a slut in any way, right? So, yeah. I do think that you're right that men desire women at least in a different way and more directly around physical beauty and sex and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the unfairness of it. You can see the unfairness of it in something like OnlyFans, right? That women do not have to and it would seem that women simply have to present their bodies in, you know, clean, in a nice way, and they can earn money from it, right? Whereas it is a somewhat hilarious idea to think of a man doing something similar if he's hoping to get women to become his OnlyFans.
No, he could get some men. He could get some. He
could get some men, but he would still have to present himself, you know, very attractively. I also think, okay, we shouldn't really get into it, but I also think men look at women and they think women are pretty and therefore I like them, and my desire for them is a nice clean desire because I'm desiring this thing that is pretty, that women can also see as pretty. Whereas these freakish women, why are they interested? What's so attractive about me? Because I think men often have a very deep lack of self-esteem about their looks, You know, even their genitalia seems freakish, strange, something that is less.
I know myself personally, that is an accurate description. But anyway.
Therefore, when you see that a woman is interested in those aspects of yourself, there must be an element that's like, what is this free? Who are these people? You know what I mean? And especially in our culture, that's such a sanitized culture, a deodorized culture, where everything is because it's such a visual culture, and because the power of women's beauty means that they front all our commercials often, because it's the cold power of their seduction, as Baudrillard would say, that's been co-opted by male-dominated advertising industries to sell diet soap to us or to sell anything else to us. Whereas, the beauty of men, is beauty even the right word? Why are women, it makes women by that gaze, which is an entirely visual gaze about beautiful things, when that's reflected back on men, it's like, but you must be freaks to be interested in what this is, because especially as we move away from cultures of, dirt, fungus, that sort of thing, it becomes anyway. I could go.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so the way I think about heterosexuality and men and women is that men desire and women desire to be desired. That's a fundamental. I think that's true. Relationship.
I think that's true. I think it's not wholly true, and I think that the power and beauty in all of this is that there's no clean and clear answers to it. But I think as a general tendency, I think it's true.
Yeah, and so what men want is they want the women to want them to want them. It's it's just to get all twisted up. And
yes.
So yeah, that seems to me to be the kind of relationship that goes on. But then I do believe that the women that have been in my life do have their own like straightforward sexual, romantic love desires.
Listen, just because you desire someone to desire you does not mean you do not desire them. It's much more complicated than that. It's much more complicated than that.
Right. You have to desire them.
Of course you do.
If you're going to desire them to desire you. So yeah, but the emphasis is just shifted from it's like the man says, I want her to want me to want her, and the woman says, I want him to want me. So it's, but so the question is why is it the case that the agency is placed with the men in this equation, and that the kind of more universal sort of natural power is with the women? Well, what is that? Does that have to do with
this is written in the stars, or are you saying why has society tended to this direction?
I don't know. I tend to think that most things are historical and socially created, and I do definitely think that the way relationships between men and women are mediated is the mediating institutions are definitely socially created, but I don't know whether or not this this relationship of desire that we just outlined is intrinsic or not. I can't tell.
It's just so fascinating. Something, what I always think about all these things is there is a true answer to all of this. It might be a complicated one. There is a true answer to it, but how are we ever going to work out what the true answer is? I'm flattered that you come to me as the oracle who's going to answer this question for
well
you.
I mean I don't necessarily expect you to know the answer, but we'll work it out. We'll explore some possibilities.
Well, in order to write I think we've discussed this before, but in order to write my novel twice, it started off because I read a lot of ancient history, because I'm just fascinated by ancient history. And what truly goes on, what are the drivers, and I read some absolutely amazing books, and a lot of them seem to be telling me that things between men and women were arranged very, very differently in the past, that which you can see, if you look at ancient Greek religion, men and women, there are male goddesses, there are female goddesses. If you look at Roman, there's a bit more male. And then you look at Old Testament, it's all men. There seems to be a real dwindling of the power of women. And I think when you look back into earliest Greek myths and you look into female fertility things that they dig up in Germany and wherever else, it is possible to construct a past. No one has any evidence for it really, but it's possible to construct a past where, women hung out in temples and were very free with their sexuality, and men really suffered from it. And there were gangs of women, living together, doing whatever they felt like, with whoever they felt like, and that was very threatening to lots of men. And you can only imagine that that's the case. I think that, for something like Gamergate, for example, I have a lot of sympathy for the men involved, the young men involved in that, because what I understand is, I'm sure it's just what I think, but what I understand is the capitalist world, technology stuff is built by men to give them something to do as a defense against women. And particularly technology is there as a defense against women. And particularly something like games is definitely a retreat place for, when you've been rejected by women, when it hasn't worked out for you in the world, you've got games, you've got music, you've got porn. And that's a place where you can go and those are places you can go and salve your wounds in, basically. And then to have women come in and take that too. It's like women can do everything, you know what I mean? Women can wear skirts and trousers. Women can be sexually desired and run companies and make games and be involved in games. Can there not be a single place that we can go to be just with people like ourselves who are not going to torment us in this way? You know what I mean? Why are you so greedy to have everything? Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that, and it's ugly, but I have a lot of sympathy. I understand. Women have the body parts and the mind to do all things, and maybe men have the mind, and although they have the body part, they feel insecure about it because it doesn't feel as beautiful, and it doesn't seem to be as easy for a man to go and stand in a field full of women and have sex with whoever he wants as it might be for a woman to do that. In the end,
just in a physical level, a man stands in the middle of a field with a bunch of women, and he can maybe have sex with, depending on his age, let's say 6 of them. But if it's, a big field of women, after a while, he's going to need to rest. I mean, whereas a woman.
Well, I'm glad we're also worried about this man and his need to rest. But yes, it's women, basically, to put it really bluntly, women's ego can have the likes, pings, swipes much more readily than men can, because men are such goons for their bodies. Sorry, no offense to men. But what I would also say about that is we're just all prisoners of biology. All these things we do to each other, the sex wars we have, the incels, the Gamergates, all of this, we're just prisoners of a biology that wants us to reproduce. And I really think it's our duty to really come to understand and have tremendous empathy for each other in our different sexes. To understand we're just prisoners of this. We need to be able to transcend it. You know what I mean? That it's designed in this way so that men will impregnate women and there'll be more, who knows who's behind all of this stuff. But we are prisoned by this. We cannot give in to the hate and resentment that it gives, although it's all too easy to do that. And it's really vital to be able to understand it. It's just prisoners of the biology. They're not abuse it.
Yeah, I think that the argument that the nature of the relationship between men and women is grounded in biology is difficult to overturn, even though I also think that the power of human ingenuity and society is so great that we overcome.
But I also think the ways that we overcome it, we seem to overcome it in the mainstream in our societies are not good enough. I think that a way of overcoming it appears to be that women to some extent need to become more like men. An example I would give is, and I know what I'm saying here can sound very much conservative, but hear me out. In Star Wars, so disappointed by the character of Rey. What a terrible character. All she is one of those fighting men, but just with a plait and hair. I think that, it's an old discussion that you're allowed to show as much violence as you want in a 12 rated film. You're certainly not allowed to show as much sex as you want in a 12 rated film. That it's much more acceptable for our kids to see dead bodies and decapitation than it is to see anything, really anything to do with sex. And I think that women, the power that women have is a power of sex. And I think that that's such a very dangerous, inflammatory power that it must be repressed. And therefore, in order for women to have equality in the world, often what they have to do is repress their sexuality to a certain extent. I don't even know what I'm sounding like when I say all this to you. But, there is pleasure in not repressing that. And there's pleasure and power in not. And why should those things be denied? And I think that the argument that says we must all become the same is not the right solution to it, basically.
Okay, so let's try to think about the original Star Wars for a moment, and say we're going to do the typical thing that people do these days, which is we're going to change the gender of Luke Skywalker. He's a woman now. He's a young woman, so how would that change the story of Star Wars if we didn't do what you're complaining about, which is basically make Luke Skywalker asexual? If we had a young woman who was sexually interested in men as the main character of Star Wars, how would that change the story? And
I think, well, a story that would be completely unacceptable and never heard in a million years, but I would love to see the stories. A sexual adventuress has sex with all these different men, find out the information that way.
Well, but imagine you didn't, all you did was change the gender and gave her all the same lines that Luke Skywalker had. So R2-D2 beams a holographic image of now Prince Leia, right? Or whatever, right? And,
Prince Leo,
or Prince Luke or whatever, right? And so now and she says, "Oh, he's so handsome. I have to go and find him." That would not be.
No, she wouldn't say. It wouldn't be. And
but whereas Luke goes, "Oh, she's so beautiful."
He doesn't go because she's so beautiful. He goes because she needs his help. Women can still go because
but help. Okay, right. But he says she's so beautiful. He's clearly, he's clearly enamored with her when he sees her. Okay,
with his own sister.
No one knew that. That was not. That was something invented later, I think. But he was clearly enamored with her. Because there's a scene in the second movie where they're kissing and stuff too, right? In a romantic way.
Is that really true? Where are they kissing?
Yeah, in Empire. Princess Leia comes in after Luke has been injured. He's on a hospital bed. Han Solo is visiting him. Yeah. Han Solo is flirting with Princess Leia. To show him up and to shut him up, she gives Luke a long, passionate kiss in front of Han Solo.
Okay.
And then leaves. And then it's in the third movie at the end of the I don't know when it's discovered or how it's exactly discovered that they're brother and sister. I don't remember that part. But in the third movie, by then it's clear that they're brother and sister. So yeah, that scene is pretty awkward, even by the end of that same movie, right?
But it should also be said, Luke is a somewhat sexless character. It's not.
But he's sexless the way an incel is sexless. He doesn't have a girlfriend, but he certainly would like one. And when he sees Princess Leia come, the hologram of her, he's like, "Oh yeah, I should rescue her because she's so beautiful and she needs my help." And that's what he says. And a woman version, a young woman version of Luke, saying the same thing would be comical.
Yes, it would be comical. It would go back to the terrible things I was saying about presenting yourself as a woman on a dating site. It would be like, what's wrong with you? It's the wrong way around, basically.
It wouldn't necessarily make her into a less sympathetic character, but it would make her funny rather than normal. She would be, it would make her seem less mature than it makes Luke,
but it doesn't. But our version of Star Wars, which I would love to see, doesn't have to be she's going for him because she's attracted to him. It would be, this is someone that needs my help. I am an adventurous.
Okay, so you're gonna
but I'm going.
But then you need someone else in the story. You have to add someone else to the story now, because if she's going to have a sexual character, she's going to be sexualized in any way. She has to have a love interest.
Why does she? Okay, but how sweet and normie you are. Why does she have to have one love interest?
Okay, or two, at least one. You want to introduce a variety?
I'm saying this is the film I would like to see. She has many love interests. She uses her ability to have many love interests in order to get the clues, information they need to furnish the plot, and it is non-judgmentally done by the fellows around her. That this is how, instead of her power being, we're talking about the Force, and let's be real about what the Force is. Really, there is a Force, and a big proponent of the Force is sexual attraction, right? But that's a very dangerous force that men don't always win in that force.
No, no, they never do. But
if women were not, shackled by men, and what I think often for men, they've been too successful in their project. They have inhibited women's knowledge of the true power of their sexuality, and therefore women are often a little bit stunted. And I think men get very frustrated about that. It's been a very successful project for them. And often I think that's why men are interested sometimes in women who are not Western women, because that project hasn't been done on them in the same way. And women who are not Western women, conventional Western women, often have a lot more power, even though we might not think that they do, and it might not be economic power. And of course, different sorts of power, but innately they have a lot more power because that project hasn't been done on them, basically. And so I think men have twisted themselves up into a terrible knot here. Anyway.
Susanna, while you're saying this, all sorts of one-liners are coming into my head. Something like, oh, well, Susanna, I'm so sorry that, Western men have suppressed Western women's sexuality, and I would just urge you to let it rip. Don't hold back anymore. You can be free.
Well, I'm glad.
now I'm like I'm headed for HR. Luckily I'm no longer employed. I'm no longer technically your publisher. So anyway,
there you go. You're free. We're all
right.
We're all free. But you see how dangerous it is to talk like this. It's really dangerous to talk like this.
Yeah. No, it is.
It's really dangerous.
Well, we're actually at an hour, so what I want to do right now is stop talking like this, and start talking about. In the second half, we'll talk about what's been going on in the publishing side. If we want to talk more about sex, I know you can't shut up about sex, so we can talk about that too.
Yeah, can I just say how? Yeah. Anyway,
go ahead. Give me some help. What is it?
No, I'm just saying we're talking about all this, and you by having me on your channel are absorbing the power of the dangerous things that I'm saying to you in a very safe way, because you're just allowed to invite me here as a guest with a bit less of a beard than the normal guests who often appear on the show. And I'm fully aware that I'm subletting a power of mine to you, which you're kind of, pimping for your audience there.
Yeah. Okay. That is absolutely true. True. And I would love to have more beardless people onto my channel now. That after all, I am single. All right, so I will end it there.